Okay, let's begin. If there's any questions, ask now. What we're going to cover today is the unknown project. I do need to mention something that I forgot to mention earlier, and that is I did take the computer in, my laptop, to have it looked at because I was having trouble with Zoom. And the computer help desk was very helpful, but they also told me that my computer laptop is not downloading Zoom automatically, even though that's what I've requested it to do. It is not doing it, and they suggested I bring it in every 3 months to have Zoom downloaded, so it would be updated, meaning I have it automatically. It's supposed to go up and update, and I thought it was, but it apparently is not, and I've got to go in and have that done every 3 months. And about every 2 months, I have to go in and have the clock adjusted. You may have noticed that the clock is pretty much on the right time. And that's because I had them adjust that since I took it in. All right, so we want to discuss the unknown project, and hopefully I'll get that mailed out today. Boy, I've got a lot to do tonight. Get your unknown project number mailed out and get the project started. And I'll talk about what I mean by getting the project started when I'm talking about that. Any question? Let me make sure I'm recording this. Stop the share. Yeah, I am. Okay, good. So let's talk about the unknown project. You can get the unknown project under, I think, week 5 of the lab. Right here is the unknown project. And we'll talk about the sample journal. That'll be an example of how you can write up your report. We'll talk about that later in the term. I'm going to talk about the unknown instructions now, and a little bit about building a dichotomous game plan. And then we'll briefly look at the unknown list. This is the bacteria species you need to work with. And we'll talk about your unknown notes. That's where you'll be doing your unknown project. And then we'll talk briefly about the grading. You should look at the grading before you turn in your report. So let's talk about the instructions for doing the unknown report. This report will be done all online, but a long time ago when we first went to online, we decided to keep the unknown report where we used to give students who came into the lab a bacteria species, and then for the rest of the term, they ran different tests to try and identify the bacteria species. Where you're still going to do this project, only you're going to do it online. So I'm going to give you a bacteria number, and that number will stand for a bacteria strain. And then you're going to run different tests to try and figure out which species you have. Let me open this up, and then we'll see the species list. I should probably just download it. It'll be easier to work with. So on the left, you have the different species, about 13 gram negatives and 13 gram positives. Is that right? A few or less gram positives. And then the different tests you can run for identifying the different species of bacteria. Let me get that out of the way. Put it down here. The different tests you can run to identify the species. Move that over. Oh, there's one more. And so I'll give you a number which will represent a species. And then you're going to run different tests to identify the species. Now, I figured this out, and with 20 students, I figured that there would be 5 or 6 different tests that you guys will be asking for the average student, which meant that there would be at least 100, maybe 120 different contacts between me and you about what test to run. And I decided that's just too much for one project to have 100 different contacts between the instructor and the student. And you guys can do it because you're only going to be doing it like 5 or 6 times, but I'm going to be doing it 100 to 120 times in the term. And that's just too much for me for one project. So I decided that I'm going to choose the first 3 tests you're going to run. And you're going to start with the gelatin hydrolysis test, and you'll probably start that today. And then you'll do the gram stain. And the reason why I'm starting that one now is that this one takes 7 days to run. So you won't get any results for 7 days because it requires 7 days to incubate. And then you're going to do the gram stain, this test over here. And that will be started Sunday. But you won't look at the results until Tuesday on the gram stain, but you'll make the gram stain on Sunday. And then you'll start the PR lactose test on Monday. And then instead of sending out 3 emails to everybody, I'm going to send 1 email to the entire class, and it will have all 3 of the tests. And this will reduce the number of contacts that I will have to the students by 60. I'll send out 1 instead of 60. And that will make this project doable, where I will be sending out between 50 and 60 different contacts between the students. Any question about that? So that's why I'm deciding which 3 tests you're going to start with. It's just to reduce the work on my part, because really 100 to 120 different contacts between the student and instructor for one project is just too much. And I'll get good tests. The gram stain will separate it down into all the bacteria species into half. So let's take an example. If it's gram negative, it's going to be one of these species here. And I got to enable editing here. Show you what to do. So if it's gram negative, it's going to be one of these species. If it's gelatin hydrolysis negative, it's going to be narrowed to these species. And then if it's AG acid gas for PR lactose, it'll be narrowed to these 4 species. Okay, so that will narrow your possibilities quite a bit. Then you have to look at what the possibilities are, and it's actually just these 4 species, if this is the case. And then you pick a test for narrowing the possibilities further. You're supposed to use dichotomous logic, where you run one test at a time, splitting the results into plus or minus or yes or no or something like that. So you're supposed to be using dichotomous logic. So you got 4 possibilities. Pick a test to split them. You could pick the urease test, But this may not be a very good test because it does separate into 2 and 2, but these are variable. That means if it's the result is positive, you have to consider that as being a possibility. But if the result is negative, you then have to consider it as a possibility. So if the result is negative, this test would not narrow it any further. So this would not be a good test to run. Because if it comes back negative, you haven't narrowed it down by any of the 4. So pick another test that would be a good one. This might be a possibility. This could be a possibility. This could be a possibility. Let's talk about that one just because it's not an even split. If it's citrate positive, then you narrow these 4 species down into 3 species. And it'd be these 3. Okay. So that's how you go about working on this test. And so you would have to ask for the citrate test. And that's using dichotomous logic if you're only asking one test at a time. And then there's 2 possibilities, plus and minus. A V, remember, can be either plus or minus. And so if the results come back as plus, that's a possibility. But if it comes back as minus, once again, that V is a possibility. Any question about any of that? So handle the V as both a plus and a minus, and that's stated on the table here, by the way. V variable. Handle as a plus and minus. That should be stated up there. I'll try and remember to do that. The ND means this test is not determined. We don't have the data for this. Actually, all of those, but let's go for that one. We don't have the data for indole test on Shigella Flexeri, if I'm reading that right. Let me go there. Shigella, I don't see the last name up there. We don't have the data there, so you have to treat an ND as a variable, meaning both a plus and a minus. Any question about any of that? Wherever there's a parentheses, it means most of them are this way. AG, there's a parentheses, most of them are negative. There are a few species in this a few strains in this species which are indole plus, but most of the strains in this species are indole negative. And for this project, all of the results you'll get, you can take that negative for being factual, meaning it's true that there are some strains, C. Ferendi, which are not negative, but if we give you a result for this project and it's negative, that means that this is the case. Any question about any of that? So that explains all of this. There's a few other things you should look at here, like it tells you about the different tests. It doesn't say it there. Okay. Oh, here it is right here. The cellular arrangement in the gram stain made from an agar stock culture, the cells can break apart. So a chain can break apart and the cells can clump together, making them look like a cluster, even though the cells were not originally in a cluster. So you must use a cellular arrangement as a guide only, and not use it to eliminate your bacteria when you do the gram stain. And it says up here in the test of the gram stain, let me get there. The different tests are in week 4. Make sure that's working. Week 5 lab is on. Turn on lab, week 5 lab now. Make sure all the modules are on. I hide week 5 lab because it's so long I don't want to confuse you. There is no week 11 in the summer, so don't need to turn that one on. So these are the different tests you can run. For the gram stain and the cell shape and arrangement, it talks about it here. Assuming I get this to come. Telling you what the shape arrangement is, the shape, and the main arrangements are for single cells, diplo pairs, staphylo clusters, strepto chains. In practice, it's usually difficult to determine gram-positive conchi are in clusters or chains when viewed in the gram stain. This is because the chains break apart and cells tend to be brought together into artificial clumps. And therefore, streptococci often look like they're in clusters. So do not rely on the arrangement from the gram stain. What you can do, and that should be stated up here. I'm surprised it's not stated. I will change this to make it stated, and that is what you can do is you need to run the cellular growth test, which is growing the cells in liquid culture and then doing a simple stain where the cells will not clump together because you grew them in a liquid culture, not a solid culture. And then you have that slide air dry and heat fix and then stain it. And then you can determine the cellular growth arrangement. And that should be stated up here, but it's not. That means I need to update that. Let me make a note of that. So you cannot determine the cellular growth arrangement from the gram stain. That's my only warning. You need to do the cellular growth arrangement test if you want to determine the cellular growth arrangement. And how you do that is you just grow the culture in liquid culture and then look at the stain, and then you can determine the cellular growth arrangement. All right, that's one warning. Let's go ahead and close that and then talk a little bit more about the procedure. Guess I can close that down. Well, I'll leave that one open. I might want it later. Let me open up the unknown instructions. So this project will be worth 75 points. You'll need to start soon because it's going to take you several weeks to get done. Oftentimes I have students who wait until the very end to start on the project, and then you're not going to finish the project. And if they do finish the project, they're not using dichotomous logic, and so they'll get a penalty, a steep penalty for not using dichotomous logic. So get started on the project soon. You can read about the rationale. So you don't need to really isolate the species because, boy, this isn't the newest one. I'm only going to send you one. Let me see if I have another copy here. I don't think that would be it. Yeah, that's not as new. You're only going to get one culture. You're not working as pairs of students. So we just cross that out. To receive a broth containing one species. We'll just cross that out. You can pretend to isolate the species, meaning you can state from when I give you the number that you're growing up the bacteria and you're streaking it out on an agar plate. You're isolating individual colonies, and then you take the cells from one colony and streak it on a second plate to get cells from a streak it out to get isolated colonies. So you get cells that went through 2 colony isolation events just to make sure you have a pure culture. And you're just going to pretend to do this because we're doing this all online. And if you wish, you can write about it in your report that you did this. It's not critical. The important part is that you're going to be given one species. And when we did this online, we decided to only give you one bacterial species because it's just too complicated to explain if I give you 2 and then you got to streak it out and pretend you get an isolated species, and then I work with that and all that. So you have a pure culture to begin with in this project, and then you work through species identification. I'm going to give you the first 3 tests, but after you get the results from those 3 tests, you should then look at the list of possibilities and then decide, why don't that, oh, there it is there. Decide which test you want to run. Okay. And then the project will be totally yours to run and do. Any questions about any of that? Where were we? Here we are. You do need to read about the test so that when you request a test, you should read about that test. For example, let's say you want to do the methyl red test. You should read about what you need to do the methyl red test and how long that test will incubate. So once you request the test and then I start it for you, you're not going to get the results until the test is done incubating. For some reason, this is very slow. Of course, my computer is still working on the lesson for the lecture. Well, I thought it was. Maybe that finished. Oh, it did finish. Good. All right. I'll work on that later. Not sure why that's taking so long. It must be the network. So it tells you about the MR test. You should read about it, what the possible results are, and then I'll send you the results. And that has to incubate for 2 to 5 days. And normally we incubate for 5 days, because if you do incubate for 2 days and it's negative, you have to repeat the test again for 5 days. So generally we just run this test for 5 days. And if you request the test, you're not going to get any results for 5 days. Any question about that? So don't expect to get the test until after the incubation period. And then if you request the test late on Friday, and I've already sent out the results on Friday, that means I won't even look at the project maybe until Monday. So the earliest you may get results would be Monday, even if the test only takes you 24 hours or less. So I'm not going to be working on this project on Sunday at all. On Saturday, sometimes, some weekends, I may work on Saturday. On other weekends, I may not work on Saturday. My point is, if you have a test request that you want to ask on Friday, you should make sure you ask for it early on Friday so that I can get you the results on Friday if the test takes less than a day, and you probably won't get the test for most of the tests. There's only a few tests that happen immediately, like the catalase test and the oxidase test. There might be one other. The pigment test happens immediately if you have cells available. If you don't have cells available, though, you have to grow it for at least a day. And then if I'm not working on Saturday and I'm not working on Sunday, any Sunday, you might not get the results until Monday. So that's just a warning if you send a test result on Friday. Don't expect anything before Friday. And if the test request takes 5 days to incubate, you won't get it on Monday either. You'll get it on Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. You'll get your results on Wednesday, the earliest. All right, any question about any of that? Anyways, it tells you what to expect, shows you the results, positive MR test, negative MR test. So you should read about the test after you ask for that test, so you know what's going on and how long it'll be before you will get results. Let's go back to the project. You can use other tests to determine the identity of your species. Like you can go online and you can work with Berge's manual. I will warn you that there are a few tests let's put that as a C. A few test results are unusual in our table of unknowns, and that's to help you identify the species. Let me show you I don't remember the example, but somebody brought it up and they said, this has, I don't know, gelatin negative, but I went online and found that this species was actually gelatin positive. Should I use gelatin positive or gelatin negative? Use this chart, because a few of the results are unusual and it was changed to make it so that you can identify the species. Okay. Any question about any of that? So you should use this chart for what the results are, not what the results are online. And most of them are correct for what is reality. Like PR inulin, well, that test is not done on any of these gram negatives. And that's why we have no data, because we don't know what the data is. We haven't looked, and nobody tests these PR inulin on these species. The sequence of tests should display dichotomous logic, where you ask for one test where the results will be yes or no or true and false. And you're asking for one test at a time. If you do not use dichotomous logic, you will receive a penalty. Shotgun logic is you just run a whole bunch of tests all at once, and that will result in a substantial number of points lost. You should record your daily lab notes. You do that in your unknown notes. There it is right there. Like I said, for some reason, I don't have the latest version, so I'm making some changes. So you need to record your daily lab notes in your unknown notes. Let me show you where that is. Under week 5 lab, unknown notes. You can add an infinite number of pages here. I have a grader, but you'll have an uploader. And so you need to put up here your unknown number. You need to have that reported, because then when you ask for a test, if you don't have a number, I'll just send you back. Your unknown notes doesn't display your number, and so I can't send you the test result. You should record your daily activities. So when you request a test, you should put it in your unknown notes page. And then when I send you the results, you should make your observation. That's your result. And then you should put your conclusions for that test. That is your interpretation of what you're observing. And you should make a distinction for a observation and an interpretation. Okay? Any question about that? So the results are an observation. That would be something like what the color of the tube is, yellow or pink. That's your observation. That's the result. And I'll send you the results. You then have to make an interpretation. The PR lactose test was acid gas, or the PR lactose test was negative. That's your interpretation of the result. So record your results and your conclusions in your unknown notes page. And then at the end of your unknown notes page, put your test that you're requesting. If you have the test you're requesting at the start of the page, I will find it. If you have it at the end of the page, that's where I'm going to look for it. If you have it somewhere in the middle of the page, I may not find your test request. So put your test request at the end of the page, and I will look there for it. If you have it at the start of the page, that's okay. I'm not going to look for it there, but I'll see it, because when the page pops up, I'll see the beginning of the page. But if it's in the middle of the page, I once had a student who, for some reason, kept wanting to put it in the middle of the page, and then I wouldn't see it. And so I wouldn't, flipping through. How can I do this? Nobody has anything, so I can't show you. But I go through here. Oh, there we go. Go through the speed grader. I just flip through the page. Nobody's going to have anything because nobody's put anything up. But I just go through here and I look at the bottom of the page. I'll scroll if I need to and look for the unknown test. And if it's in the middle of the page, I'm just going to look at the bottom of the page and I won't see it if it's in the middle of the page. And so I may miss it. So don't put it in the middle of the page. Make sure it's at the bottom of the page. And if you have it at the top of the page, that's all right. I will see it because that'll be showing up when I open the page. Some other things you should put in the unknown notes page. You should have the species under consideration. For example, after I sent you the gram stain, the gelatin hydrolysis test, and the PR lactose test, there's only 4 species under consideration: Citrobacter furendi, Enterobacter aerogenes, Enterobacter, I can't read all that one, I can actually read, Cloacae, and E. coli are the only 4 species under consideration now. Let's remove that. So that should be stated in your unknown notes page. And then when you're writing up your lab report, you should state that as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So I think that's it for your unknown notes pages. Your unknown notes pages, if you write it up very formally, will be very similar to what you're recording in the lab report. And some people like to be very formal, and then they just copy their unknown notes page, especially if they're adding to it each time, and then they just copy it, and then they submit that for their unknown project. That'll be a lot of your unknown report. It's not all of your unknown report, because your unknown notes page does not require certain items that your unknown report does require. But it would be a lot of your unknown report if you write it up very formally. But the unknown notes page can be written up informally, because I don't care about your grammar and your spelling in your unknown notes page, and you can not gonna have write complete sentences. You're not going to be marked down for that. But in your unknown report page, you should be using formal writing, complete sentences, and you'll be graded for the readability and flow of the unknown report. All right. So the unknown notes page doesn't have to be formal, but it can be. And it can be, and if it is formal, it'll make it easier you're writing the report. The unknown report must be typewritten. Of course, you're going to submit it online, so it'd be hard to do handwriting, but it has to be typewritten. You should also use 12-point font. I've got glasses, as you're seeing, and if it's smaller than that, I'll have a hard time reading it. You don't want to make it hard for me to read it. I'll grade you harder if I have a hard time reading it. And it should not be double spaced. It should be written, actually, I don't care if it's in bullet points or in paragraph format, I don't care. So let's just remove that. Yeah, let's just write that. You should record descriptions of the tests you run, the information you hope to gain from these tests, and the observations and conclusions you made from those tests. And that should be in conclusions. You should not omit data that makes your project look better. Report everything you have. Drawings, photos, and tables are very helpful, but they are not required. and drawings, photos, tables must be completely labeled and discussed within the body of your report. Each report entry must begin with a date and a time. Your unknown notes page will do that automatically. You do not need to put step-by-step details for each test you run. All you need to do if you do the gram stain is say, I ran the gram stain. I know the steps of the gram stain. So just say you ran the gram stain.
I have something to say. Can you hear me?
Go on.
Okay. The rest of the class is in a different Zoom and they're waiting. Like
Why
there's,
are they in a different Zoom?
well, this is the lecture Zoom.
Oh,
They were waiting in the lab Zoom.
oh my goodness. How odd. All right, thank you for checking on that and doing that. I don't even know why I got a lecture Zoom.
Okay.
I should not have gotten a lecture Zoom. Let me leave this meeting.
Okay.